Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you're well. I hope you enjoyed the Brazilian Grand Prix. And I mean, if you didn't enjoy the Brazilian Grand Prix, you might want to find another sport. Maybe Formula 1 isn't for you because it was absolutely amazing. It was one of the most exciting, controversial and entertaining weekends we have had in Formula 1, possibly ever. But like 2021 just keeps on delivering. Like every single weekend feels like it is an absolute classic and just goes down in history. Like this season is going to go down as one of the best, if not possibly the best we have ever had in Formula 1, depending on how these last three races go. I'm going to start by talking about this man here, Lewis Hamilton, because I thought on the day he was absolutely amazing. Throughout the entire weekend, he was just sublime. Like, qualifies on pole, over half a second in front of his title rival, and then it all goes wrong for him, doesn't it? You know, in the sprint race, he ends up having to start 20th and has to battle through the whole field. And obviously, we had the controversy with Lewis Hamilton, his rear wing not meeting the requirements and the regulations. Obviously, Max Verstappen touching it. Not going to talk about it again. Not going to talk about it again because I've done so much talking about this controversy over the weekend. Both videos that I did over the weekend linked in the description down below. But starting from the back, manages to get himself all the way up into 5th and then has to replace his ICE anyway and gets another 5 places drop. So the team are just under so much pressure over the course of the weekend. Like, he does so well in the sprint race, does the most overtakes per kilometre race in a sprint race ever, and then backs it up with, you know, having to start from 10th. Just the demoralization that Lewis Hamilton, you know, the pain that he has to go through over the course of this weekend. Every time it looks like he's getting up, he's knocked down a little bit further. He gets onto pole, knocked down to 20th. Gets up to 5th, knocked down to 10th. It just didn't seem like it was going to go his way at all, but he just kept on coming up. And then, you know, within like 3 or 4 laps of the race starting, suddenly he was in with a chance to win the race. You know, even starting from 10th, I was talking about it before the Grand Prix. I was like, that is going to be tough. He's got a lot of drivers with a lot of experience in front of him. You know, we've seen him struggle to get past various drivers over the course of the season, Alonso being the case in point in Hungary. But he just did it. He just made it look absolutely so easy and made me look like an absolute mug. Like, I thought it was going to be really, really difficult for him to get all the way through the field, and he just absolutely smashed it. And you know what? I don't think we've seen vintage Hamilton this season. I don't think he's been himself over the course of this year. We've seen lots and lots of mistakes that are very unlike Hamilton, especially in a season where he was battling for a title, as he continually battles for titles over this era of Formula 1. But this weekend, I mean, if you can't appreciate this weekend and how good Hamilton was this weekend, I don't know what more you want from him. He was one of the absolute best drives I've ever seen this weekend, and possibly the best drive I've ever seen from Lewis Hamilton. Of his 101 wins, standing at the top of the podium again. I think this goes up there. I think this is in the upper echelons of those 101 wins. You know, possibly top 5 for me. He was absolutely sublime and deserved to pick up those points. Obviously doesn't put him top of the Drivers' Championship as of yet, but does narrow the gap to Max Verstappen. Whilst we're talking about Hamilton versus Verstappen, I will delve into, obviously, the battle that they had on track. Of course, to win the race, Hamilton had to overtake everybody on the grid, most of them more than once. But most importantly, he had to overtake his championship rival in Max Verstappen. And, you know, there was already talk this weekend that, you know, it's a sprint race. They have a little bit of a to and fro in sprint races. They came together in Silverstone. They came together in Monza. Are they going to come together again? And it was very, very close to them coming together again. They were battling on track continually. And obviously, as I said, Lewis Hamilton was right in behind Max Verstappen within sort of 10 or 15 laps of this race. It was looking like Lewis Hamilton was going to catch him at some point. Obviously, after the stops, Hamilton finds himself behind his title rival with Max Verstappen coming in early. But Max Verstappen had track position. Lewis Hamilton was catching. Now, one thing to catch, another thing to pass, as we always say in Formula 1, especially when Max Verstappen is doing absolutely everything and anything he possibly can to keep you behind him. To the extent where Max actually picks up a black and white flag for weaving down towards turn 4. But they were going nail and tongue to each other, and Hamilton did eventually come out on top. Obviously, down towards turn 4 was the corner where Lewis Hamilton was continually attacking. That was his area that he'd found the DRS down into turn 1 wasn't quite enough, but he could get a really good exit through 1, 2, and 3 and battle down towards turn 4. And that was sort of where we saw him continually go for it. And we reached lap 48. The two of them are side by side, and Hamilton is right under the rear wing of Max Verstappen, darts out to the right-hand side, obviously tries to go around the outside of the Red Bull. And I'm going to be honest here, I think that Max Verstappen knows what he's doing and, shuffles Lewis Hamilton as far out wide as possible. Neither of the Mercedes nor the Red Bull actually ended up making the corner. A massive load of runoff, and, they're lucky that runoff over there is not, gravel or grass, because both of them went really, really wide. And Hamilton tries to pass, and I think Max Verstappen honestly pushes him over the limit and pushes him off of the track. Now, lots has been made of this incident, and there's sort of two questions to be placed, and I'd love to know your opinions on these two questions in the comments down below. First of all, does Verstappen push Hamilton off the road intentionally to keep the place? Now, I don't know if it's intentional, but he definitely does as much as he possibly can to keep that place over and over again. And we have seen a few little incidents with Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. And don't get me wrong, Lewis Hamilton has been in the wrong for these incidents as well too. But in this case here, I think Max Verstappen is in the wrong for this one and does shuffle Lewis Hamilton off of the track. I know that it wasn't given, and I know that, the FIA obviously explained their point of view on it. But for me, I think that should have been a penalty. And then the second sort of question is, if it is a penalty, then what kind of penalty does he incur? Is it a 5-second penalty? Does he have to give the place to Hamilton? Now, I don't think he should have to give the place to Hamilton. I think that was, one of those things that people were talking about that is a little bit over the edge, but definitely a 5-second penalty, considering what we're going to talk about next with Yuki Tsunoda. I think a 5-second penalty for Max Verstappen would have been fairly, reasonable, and also would have cost him quite dearly, because Valtteri Bottas, by the end of the race, was within those 5 seconds. Now, you could argue Max Verstappen had already lost the position and therefore, wasn't trying his 100% to try and gain back on Lewis Hamilton, because he knew that was never really going to happen, and might have, extended his lead over Valtteri Bottas had he needed to. But he would have been caught by Valtteri Bottas within that 5 seconds. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, what did you think down into turn 4? Personally, for me, I think the FIA should have given it to him. I think more as a precedent for everyone else. Like, if Max Verstappen gets away with this one, then if we see a very similar incident with any other two drivers, then the same sort of precautions and the same sort of non-penalty should be given. And I think we've seen this quite a lot over the season, where penalties have been given for this kind of thing. I think back to, Austria with Sergio Perez. He ended up picking up a couple of penalties for Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc. I think that is the precedent that the FIA should have set, and I think they went against that with this Max Verstappen incident. I think they also made a mistake with Yuki Tsunoda, to be honest with you. And this was the other incident that the FIA has sort of maybe got a little bit wrong in my eyes. I think that when Yuki Tsunoda comes up the inside, I know that there's contact between the two, and I think that costs Yuki Tsunoda massively, as you can see from this image here. But I don't think Yuki Tsunoda deserved a penalty from this position. I think, if anything, Lance Stroll maybe deserved a penalty. Now, in the end, it didn't really matter. Yuki Tsunoda obviously came home 15th, and Lance Stroll couldn't finish the race after the damage that he incurred. But at the same time, these two coming together, again, we have to set a precedent with the FIA. They need to be consistent with these kinds of things. And I think by the time they get down into turn 1, Yuki Tsunoda is by far and away alongside enough that Lance Stroll has to give him the space. There's sort of 70 to 80% of the AlphaTauri is alongside the Aston Martin. And I think the Aston Martin driver in Lance Stroll just, kind of tries to squeeze him out. Yuki Tsunoda is well within the track limits. He is going to make the corner. And it's either Lance Stroll doesn't see him, or Lance Stroll turns in, hoping that he can almost scare Yuki Tsunoda off the track. And I don't think that he looks. I think that he just goes for it. He tries to take the normal racing line. And I think Stroll turns in on him. And I cannot see how Yuki Tsunoda picks up a penalty from this, in my opinion. I think if anything, it should go the other way and Lance Stroll should pick up a penalty. But again, I guess in the end, it didn't really matter. But I think we have to set a precedent. You know, like the Max Verstappen penalty didn't really matter in the end. He ended up coming second. But it's the intention, it's the precedent the FIA sets. Again, Yuki Tsunoda, Lance Stroll, neither of them ended up getting anywhere near the points. Lance Stroll ended up not even finishing the race. But again, it sets a precedent for these things in the future as to how the FIA will manage these things. And when there isn't, you know, black and white clarity from the FIA, it becomes really difficult for one, the teams to know what's going on, and secondarily for us as fans to know what's going on as well, especially if new fans are coming to the sport. Let's talk about the rest of the field, though, very quickly, because there was other things that happened in this race, lots of things that happened in this race, and way too many things probably for me to cover this very moment. But Ferrari did it again, I think, is one of the things we need to sort of have a look at. So consistent. By the way, Charles Leclerc only has one podium this season. I don't know how. He has deserved so many more. He has one podium finish and is 3 points now off Lando Norris. Like, going into the middle of the season, if you'd have said to me that Lando Norris is going to get caught by anyone in that back of the pack, like the Ferraris, Daniel Ricciardo, Gasly, I'd have said you were absolutely insane. Like, Lando Norris was on fire. And yes, the McLaren really hasn't turned up for him, but Charles Leclerc, take a bow. You have been absolutely phenomenal. And by the way, Carlos Sainz, who isn't that too far behind his teammate either, and could also catch Lando Norris with the consistency that they are showing, is just doing an amazing job in his first season at Ferrari. Like, I keep saying it, I'm going to repeat myself. Ferrari have the best pairing on the grid. If you look at those pairings of drivers, Ferrari is the best pairing for me on the grid. I know, I keep saying it, I'm going to repeat it. Although, talking about McLaren and the Constructors' Championship, of Ferrari now looking like they're going to run away with it, because McLaren just really not coming together. And I think that was a little bit unfortunate, because obviously Lando Norris does get a puncture down into turn one. I thought maybe he could have done something, especially because off the start line, it looked like he might have got past Carlos Sainz had he not picked up that puncture by hitting into his front wing. And then, you know, Daniel Ricciardo, DNFs as well. Just all round, it wasn't a good weekend for us McLaren fans, was it? Although, on the other hand, Pierre Gasly fans, including myself as well, were very happy. Another great weekend from him. Another qualifying that just shows how incredible he can be on one lap. Just sensational. And, you know, a 7th place finish to boot, picks up some more championship points, keeps AlphaTauri level with Alpine. Obviously, Alpine just ahead because they have the better finish in Ocon's win in Hungary. And Gasly just, you know, in a league of his own almost. He's not going to catch Ricciardo, I don't think, but at the same time, he's miles ahead of Alonso. And he's just in that midfield of his own. Like, he's not quite going to catch the top 4 teams, but he's by far and away better than all of the other drivers from all of the midfield and lower field teams. So Pierre Gasly, for me, absolutely sensational. Alpine, again, also very consistent. They've done very well. Mexico was a bit of an off weekend for them, but again, both drivers in the points, both drivers consistently in the points recently. I think they're doing pretty good. Latifi out-qualified Russell. Didn't finish in front of Russell, but out-qualified Russell. And that's mental, because George Russell is so good on one lap. I just think, you know, he had a really tough weekend and really didn't get any sort of pace together until the race. And to be honest, I thought Williams might be a little bit quicker this weekend, but just didn't come together for them in the end. And then that was about it, really. What happened at the back? Obviously, the Haasers, they were there. There's going to be a battle between these two Haasers where they come together. They were so incredibly close. Like, Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher just edging ever closer to that contact between the two Haasers. And I'm really looking forward to the Gunter Steiner outbreak after those two come together, because it is just going to be hilarious. And as much as I don't want them to come together, obviously I don't want either of them to get injured. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not coming at it from that point of view, but I would just like to see them come together just so we can have some Gene, you know, maybe a little phone call to Gene. We all love a phone call to Gene, especially in Drive to Survive. I'm just really looking forward to the Haas episode, as we do every single season. But as I said, this weekend was absolutely phenomenal. Will go down as one of the best Brazilian Grand Prix weekends we're ever going to see. And I think that's saying something, because Brazil just always delivers exceptional races. And we are back, obviously, for Qatar this weekend. A triple header. We're back live Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're covering the qualifying, covering the race. We'll be back. And another video coming for you later on in the week. Going to have a little look at sprint races, considering we've had all 3 of our sprint races this season. Little early preview if you'd like to let me know what you think in the comments down below. But lots of questions for you to answer. Obviously, what do you think happened between Max and Hamilton? Do you think Max should have ended up with a penalty? What about Yuki Tsunoda and Stroll? Who should have ended up with a penalty there, if either of them? What are you thinking into Qatar? And my goodness me, who are you going to think is going to win this championship? I'm flip-flopping again. After Mexico, I said Max Verstappen looked so quick and just uncatchable. But now, Lewis Hamilton looks so quick and just uncatchable. And I cannot pick who is going to win. But thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you next time.